Welcome to episode number 231 of the Beyond Social Media Show, the podcast for all of you marketing, advertising, public relations, and communications professionals. We're recording live on YouTube on June 8, 2018. Plenty of things to talk about this week, as usual. Gates Notes, excuse me, Silent PR, Burger Summit, SEO Audits, Apple announcements, paper podcasts, Octogenarian Make-A-Wish, Amazon archives, political ad rules, privacy pandering, furry influencers, Atlas has got ups, iHob, and much, 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 much more. BL kicks it off with the best story of the week. BL, what do you got?
Well, I kind of tried for a lot of good news this week, but the thing that really made me happy was Bill Gates' new site and blog, and he has a summer reading list. It's called Gates Notes. You kind of join it. I got this through Ann Handley's newsletter, which everybody really should read. It's just wonderful. And the blog is absolutely terrific. And one of the things that he's doing is he's offering a free gift of a book, because he's really into books, to all of this year's college graduates in the U.S. He said there's a copyright issue in doing it beyond the U.S. The book is called Factfulness, and it's by the late global health expert and noted sword swallower Hans Rosling, and it's packed with lots of advice about how to see the world clearly. And he says, although I think everyone should read it, it has especially useful insights for anyone who's making the leap out of college and into the next phase of life. And he says, I hope you enjoy it as much as I did, and I hope you take Hans's advice to heart. When we have a fact-based worldview, we can see the world is not as bad as it seems, and we can see what we have to do to keep making it better. Boy, I agree. And my wish right now is, that you read the book if you're getting out of school. He writes about saving lives, about energy innovation, about improving education, philanthropy, books, and about himself. And what he writes about himself is really, it's a surprising Bill Gates, because he's always, every time I've ever seen him, he's, just been kind of into, like, not outgoing. And in this, he seems very friendly and relaxed and real. And I'll include the video where he talks about the books. Really fun.
That's great. A great recommendation. Factfulness is a great title for a book that's that everybody probably should read. I haven't heard of it until now, but certainly the title resonates in this day and age, right?
Yeah.
Right? And Gates, I've been long admired Gates. And, the one thing that you often see in articles about successful CEOs is the readers. They read a lot. So
yeah, he has a list of scores of books. He's got his books he read this year, books he's going to read, books he suggests you read. I mean, it's a wonderful site, and it's very genuine. I like it. Somebody else is not writing it for him.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, from a book list to a card list that must be read, BL and the listeners, longtime listeners will know I'm a huge football fan, not a particularly big fan of Philadelphia Eagles, but they gained my respect a little bit recently, because some of their players have knelt in protest, not this year, but in years past, over police brutality of African Americans. And they, if you're paying attention to the headlines, had been disinvited to the White House because several of their players said they didn't want to go. And Trump said, well, if you don't want to go, I don't want you there, because he's a toddler. And and so in response to Trump's disinvitation to the White House for the Philadelphia Eagles safety, Malcolm Jenkins held a silent public press conference. So sitting in front of his locker in their locker room, and he did not speak a word. What he did instead, in front of a scrum of reporters with all their microphones in his face and asking questions, instead of speaking, he held up cards that he'd written messages on. Among those messages, I'm going to read 3 of them for you. One of them read, more than 60% of people in prison are people of color. Another one read, nearly 200,000 juveniles enter the adult criminal system every year, most for nonviolent crimes, #stop school pipeline to prison. And another one read, in 2018, 439 people shot and killed by police thus far. In the US population, 8% are African American males. Those shot by police, 25% are African American males. And then another one, which he raised several times as reporters were asking questions, read simply, "You're not listening." So it was a brilliant PR move. It was a PR stunt that guaranteed media coverage. And by remaining silent, people weren't focusing on his voice, weren't focusing on the fact that he's a professional athlete. It was prompting people to force them to read the signs. So they actually got
be
messages.
Misquoted.
He couldn't be misquoted, correct. So he posted the signs on his Twitter account. I just checked Google Trends. There's a spike in searches for Malcolm Jenkins signs the day that he had his press conference. So just absolutely brilliant way of getting your message across and reclaiming the message that the athletes are actually trying to get across is the violence against African Americans, and it's not disrespect for the flag. It's not anti-patriotic. It's actually entirely patriotic, because this is what we do as Americans. We protest.
Yes, and also this week, the president, and what he did is he had a patriotic something or another in place of the Philadelphia team, and he didn't know the words to "God Bless America." Okay,
that's
so
right.
he didn't.
And
He doesn't know them.
They brought in interns to fill out the space, so it would look like there were people attending.
It's very sad. Well, speaking of PR stunts, is much happier top. Well, there are no happy topics anymore, are there? Stu Leonard's, which is a chain of grocery stores well known in the East and for which I worked for a very long time, has made an offer of 10,000 burgers for the Trump Jong Un summit. And so North Korea, for some weird reason, said they want to open a burger joint in Pyongyang. So this may be a medium rare opportunity for the Connecticut supermarket. And Stu Leonard Jr., who's the CEO of the company, offered to donate 10,000 burgers for the Peace Summit. And this was from a story in the Shelby Report, which is a food industry newsletter. And, followed this curious idea about a burger joint. So he offered to donate burgers that have USA stamped in the middle of them, and they would be made from the new filet mignon burger that's made by hand, and Stu Leonard's using his butcher shop cuts. He got to put this in the press release, including his filet mignon short rib and ground chuck. And he said, filet mignon's America's favorite, and it would be a great way to kick off the country's new relationship with North Korea. And then, of course, we know about the president's fondness for hamburgers, and I guess you're going to have to give them French fries too. So
Freedom fries.
What kind? Freedom fries. Yeah. The Leonard family started the dairy in 1923, and they opened their first retail dairy store in 1969, and now they have next month opening their 11th store, and they're in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, and in Long Island, and they buy directly from family-owned farms and ranches and fisheries. And Brian Miller, who was the New York Times food editor when I was working for the store, gave it its nickname, the Disneyland of dairy stores, because it has costume characters dressed as cows and chickens walking around through the store, and there are animation, animatronics, people playing the banjo, big characters. And the idea is that if kids want to go to a store, their parents will follow. So, but Peace Burgers, I love that.
That's a great idea. So, another good idea is if you, every 3 years or so, it's time to refresh your website, do a website redesign, because standards and styles change, and your website kind of starts looking dated after 3 years. We're in the middle of doing that for our agency. We often do that for clients. And so whenever we do that for a client, one of the first things I do is do an SEO audit, because one of the things that happens if you're not careful with a website redesign is you completely screw up your organic search traffic if you don't know what you're doing. So I came across an article on Search Engine Watch by Marcella De Vivo, which was top elements of an SEO audit that is really very helpful. So quickly then do a crawl report, suck in all the URLs of your website and find out where the errors are and what's giving you 404 errors. That crawl report will take care of a lot of that. So identify technical errors that you can fix. HTTPS, the secure encrypted connection, is now kind of standard. So check your status codes to make sure that's all fine and working. XML sitemaps to feed to Google to tell them where all the pages are on your site. Site load time, if your site is loading slowly, then that's a problem for SEO. These are all things that you can check during an SEO audit. Is it mobile friendly? Are you cannibalizing some of your traffic with multiple pages that are going after the same search terms? Robot text file, manual Google site search, a lot of this stuff, duplicate content will be done with an SEO audit. So we'll include a link to this in the show notes for the checklist so you can have access to that. And then there was another resource I found from Aleda Solis, which is an HTTP to HTTPS migration checklist. So this is what a lot of people are doing now, is moving from the old version to the new encrypted version. And this is a nice Google document that you can copy into your own Google Drive that includes a checklist of the things you need to check when you are doing that migration. So some good resources for you there.
I am waiting for Google to do that for me. So no, those are really good things to know, and I certainly need to figure out the HTTPS thing. So speaking of software, the top news from Apple's developer conference this week, stop scoffing, is nothing to do with hardware. It was all about software. That's the Worldwide Developers Conference. And so the most interesting things, and this is from an IGN article by Jason Cipriani, excuse me. I think this is really the most interesting one of all. FaceTime is going to get its first real update since the service was first announced. You're going to be able to do group FaceTime calls on iOS 12, which is the phone app, and the new Mac OS Mojave will support up to 32 people at any given time. So you're going to be able to see 4 participants who are active in the conversation and a scrolling list of people who are in the call at the bottom of the screen. And they also announced these Animoji characters, and you can make these characters with your own face inside the Animoji, which is really kind of funny. They call them memojis, and you can use them in your calls, instead of your face. But anyway, I think that's going to be a big deal because 4 people on the screen at one time is hard to come by it with clarity. Also, for the first time, the phone apps are going to work on the Mac desktop. They're going to start with 4 Apple News, voice memos, stocks, and a home app for controlling your smart devices. And then Apple's going to address smartphone addiction, which they help to create. There's a setting that will show you how often you pick up your phone, how many notification apps send you every day, how much time you spend on apps like Instagram or any other app. We are addicted. This is all true. And then I think this is fun. The Apple Watch OS 5 is getting an update that has, it'll be like having your very own Dick Tracy watch, for those of you who know who Dick Tracy was. And you'll be able to have a walkie-talkie on your wrist, which I think is super cool. And so those were the announcements, and no hardware was announced, but new things are surely coming up in September.
Well, it makes me think of that George Carlin line, I think it was, where he said, I've been doing cocaine for 20 years and I'm not addicted. Yeah, we're all addicted to it's funny that everybody is doing the mindfulness thing now, shutting off notifications. Everybody's building those features into their platforms now. So
well, actually, one of the things I read this week, and I can't at this moment remember the name of the company, is a company that's trying to get their mindfulness app to be a prescription that doctors can give so that the app will be paid for. It's a meditation, but I mean, it's
a nice play.
It's a nice play, but it's really something that would help a lot of people. I don't know if you meditate. I mean, I've been doing it for quite a while, and it's a huge help, you know, and I mean, I do it like 5 minutes a day. I'm not talking about, you know, a big thing, but anyway, is that
so? Yeah, no, you know, we talked about when everybody's zigging, you zag. This is an interesting zag. I came across this at a Barnes and Noble recently. Caught my eye. It was at at the checkout line in a display, and Barnes and Noble was giving it away, and it's called The Pod Papers, and it is a publication, a magazine. Called the Pod Papers magazine.
And it has what in it?
Well, I actually came across an article by Fast Company by Melissa Locker after the fact and filled in a little of the details. But it's a magazine. Basically, it is a transcription of your favorite podcasts. So you can read your favorite podcasts. Now, that sounds kind of counterintuitive, right? I mean,
well, everything old is new again. It's happening all over the place, you know.
But it's basically it's a time. They've got time stamps of the podcast, you know, and they say who's talking and everything. And it's accompanied by this grammar girl. It's accompanied by some beautiful illustrations. It's on heavy stock paper. It's really actually a beautiful publication.
And it's free?
And it's free. And it's created by, this is the hook here, it's created by the Paper and Packaging Board, which of course is an industry group that, according to this article, quote, helps to help slow the decline in paper use and expand demand for paper-based packaging products. So it's an industry group, and it's at Barnes and Noble, so a physical bookstore that sells paper books. Yeah, two industries kind of trying to prop themselves up a little bit with this. So yeah, I found it amusing, fascinating at the same time.
Well, it would be more amusing to me if you could pick the transcripts you wanted, but obviously you can't do that in a paper publication. But many podcasts do provide their transcripts if you want to read them.
Well, they do have, I mean, they do have top name podcasts. 99% Invisible, Design Matters, Grammar Girl, or some of the podcasts that are listed in it. But
well, if it turns more people onto podcasts, it's okay with me, you know. Yep. So I came across this thing that I just think is so adorable. This was on Philly.com by Stephanie Farr, and apparently for the past 2 years, the staff at Wesley, which is a home for senior residents in Warminster, Pennsylvania, has been granting bucket list wishes across its 6 retirement communities under a program called Wellesley Enhanced Living Wishes, Well Wishes. So here's some of the things they did. Henry Alheiser, who's 82, fell in love with Lady Gaga when he was watching her concerts on HBO at the Wesley Enhanced Living Retirement Community in Upper Moreland. His favorite song is Born This Way, and he wanted to meet her. So they put on a social media campaign to see if they could get a meeting for him, but that didn't work. So they got him tickets, and he said the show was the best experience he's ever had. The wishes that people have had range from, you know, so heart-pounding that you have to get a doctor's clearance, like skydiving, or a trip to Terror Behind the Walls at Eastern State Penitentiary, to the small but immeasurably meaningful. So one was Dolores Salamone, who's 82, and she wanted to go to Sicily, the homeland of her father's family, but they didn't have the budget for it, so the staff improvised. They got a virtual reality headset, and they downloaded 360-degree YouTube videos of Sicily. She said, "Oh, wow, this is beautiful. There's sun shining on the sea." Then she looked around at the virtual tour and she said, "Oh my God, now we're back in town. There's graffiti in Sicily. And there's a Coke machine. Can you believe that?" I mean, she just was so into it. And she said, "Hey, it looks like the Italian market on 9th Street. So then after the tour, the kitchen crew made a Sicilian meal for her, and an Italian opera singer serenaded her, and she was equally flattered and embarrassed by all the attention. And then there was a 99-year-old Nettie Weiss, whose wish was simply to get her ears pierced again so that on her 100th birthday she could wear a pair of earrings her husband gave her before he died. You know, and then there was the skydiver.
There's always one.
I love that. I just love that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. This is pretty awesome too. I came across an article. This is very quick. Came across an article on Ars Technica where the staff decided to download their Amazon buying history. So if you go to your order history, you can actually download a spreadsheet of your entire history. Mine goes back to 2006. Comes in a spreadsheet format, and they basically made charts of their buying history. So they saw how much most of them were down in 2008, not surprisingly. And after they joined Amazon Prime, their buying went spiked. So they bought a lot more after they joined Amazon Prime. But they talked about some of their purchases over the years, which was a fascinating read. So I'll put a link to it. But also, it occurs to me after reading that this is a new behavior. We're actually able to do analytics on our own purchase histories through the years that we were never able to do before. So there you go.
When I see how many hair products I buy and things for the dog, I mean, it's just ridiculous. But anyway, that brings us to bad news. And, you know, I don't know, Facebook just seems not to be able to get out of its own way anymore, but they have started forcing news media to register as political advertisers. So this is from a story in The Verge from Russell Brandom. And it's part of a new wave of ad suspension that began when they started enforcing their new rules for political advertising that are supposed to prevent interference from Russian trolls and other foreign groups. And they require completely strict verification of any account promoting political content. It's meant to be a minor inconvenience for a political campaign, but the same rules also apply to neutral news content. And they've taken a whole bunch of news organizations by surprise. A limited search by The Verge found that 85 of their news posts had fallen afoul of the rules in the first week, including seemingly innocuous stories on graduation speeches or the British royal family. The verification typically requires a government-issued ID to trigger a verification code sent to a U.S. mailing address, a process that takes several days and significant coordination, which of course eliminates the possibility of breaking news. So they just really need to think harder about what they're doing over there.
Well, I mean, this is the way that this kind of stuff rolls out. You roll it out, and everybody, one, on Facebook, everybody complains about any change, period.
That's for sure.
That's going to happen. And two, then they presumably go back and try and fix the things that aren't working. We'll see about this. But the larger point I wanted to make is we shouldn't be relying on Facebook for our news.
Absolutely not.
Facebook is not for news. Of the news organizations that you track and get your news there. Google search, the organic results are going to give you news, and if it's not a site you're familiar with, investigate it and find out what's behind it and everything.
Absolutely,
there is fake news we still need to deal with, but get your sites directly from
does that. Very few people do.
I don't know. I think
you can tell that by the crap that gets circulated on Facebook and Twitter. People are not vetting their information sources. I mean, the people we know do, but that's kind of rare. That's part of the problem. That's exactly part of the problem.
We've met the enemy, and
he is us.
The enemy is us. Right?
That's absolutely true. I mean, it's our own fault. So what have you got, Dave?
So you mentioned Apple's announcements for their Worldwide Developers Conference. I've got one in bad. This is from a Wired article by Lily Hay Newman, who talks about how Apple made a big splash over their new privacy features in the Safari browser, which the Safari browser is for crap as far as I'm concerned, by the way. It always blocks the Washington Post whenever I click on an article and it launches the Safari browser. So screw you, Safari. Anyway.
How did I know you were going to say that?
I I have always thought that Apple's posturing on privacy. We care so much about your privacy. We're unlike other bullshit. I don't agree. I don't believe it at all. And turns out I was right. So the New York Times reporters are Gabriel Dance, Nicholas Confessori, and Michael LaFagoria had a big investigative report on Facebook data sharing practices. And so they had the data sharing partnerships with smartphone makers. Among them, one of them was Apple. So Apple's getting all kinds of data from Facebook. They really care about your privacy. Not so much.
Well, actually, Facebook had an explanation for that that made sense to me, saying that that was the only way they could get onto the phones and that they were not actually sharing all that information. So and I know you don't like Safari, and I know you don't like Apple, so, we could disagree.
I have an iPhone. I have Apple products. I think they make great products. I have 2 MacBook Airs. They're great products, but their posturing is just public relations. It's not.
Well, everybody's posturing is public relations,
Yeah,
Dave.
so
I mean,
I'm
let's get
calling it out.
serious.
I'm calling
Yeah.
it out.
Okay, so this could have gone in good. I guess I'm a little bit jealous about this one, but there is such a thing as pet social media influencers who have brands that sponsor them. And guess what? They have managers, these furry little creatures. And this is from a CNBC story by Erin Barry. It's a story I wish I knew about 5 or 6 years ago when my dog Benny was in his prime. He's a little bit too old for this right now, but there's a new wave of dogs, cats, monkeys, even a possum that are getting big bucks and wide followings. And many of them have a Harvard-educated lawyer as their agent. And so she's a woman is brilliant. She's a star pet talent agent. Her name is Lonnie Edwards, and she has unique clients, including Real Diddy Kong, which are 2 monkeys with over 1 million Instagram followers. Hamlet the Piggy, who has over 300,000 followers. It's Me, Sesame, the Rescue Opossum, with over 62,000 followers. And Lionel the Hog, who is a hog, who boasts over 130,000 followers. So, of course, you may be wondering, how much do pet influencers make? Was the first thing I wondered about. Influencers on the larger scale with millions of followers get about $15,000 per sponsored posts. Now, I always thought that Benny should get a job, and right now he's just laying on his bed like everything was my fault. So there's a lot of money to be made if you have a large following, is what Edwards told CNBC. And a lot of these pets have more followers than a lot of humans. So they have this agency that Lonnie Edwards founded called the Dog Agency. And she said, look, everybody loves them. They make people happy. So when people like the brands as well, because the content makes them happy. And she says on their website, we handpick and cultivate the best talent to create premium content that appeals to fans and brands alike, and strategically connect the dots and streamline the collaboration process. Blada blada. We have secured media opportunities for our clients in outlets such as BuzzFeed, People, The Today Show, The Wall Street Journal, The Huffington Post, Refinery 29, Elite Daily, and Mashable. We have worked with brands such as Google, Dyson, 20th Century Fox, Barney's New York, Accor Hotels, Purina, Merck, and Nikon. So the site also includes Choosy, which is fashions for the discerning pet, that have designs like the Caddy Velour pullover for $55 and the $42 Sunday brunch pullover. They come in small to large, and each one links with the Instagram account of one of the agency's clients wearing whatever it is. And there's a pug named Walter, who has 90,000 followers and who's been on CBS This Morning as a guest modeling the clothes. And so if you think that your pet has what it takes to be the next one, she also offers advice for getting your baby there. She says, create engaging content, develop a brand around the pet, and make sure it's fun. At the end of the day, This is my favorite part. The pet has to love getting dressed up and posing for photos. She also runs PetCon NYC dog meetups, and those are celebrity pet meet and greets with, it says on the website, insightful panels, adoptable pets, curated vendors, and fun. And, you know, more power to her. I mean, if they're making $15,000 a post, more power to the owners of those pets. But I think Benny is one lazy labradoodle.
Well, I guess what I want to know is who represents Grumpy Cat.
Grumpy Cat's over, Dave.
What do you mean? Grumpy Cat is the pioneer. Of course,
Wow.
the dog agency wouldn't be representing Grumpy Cat, I guess, right?
I think Grumpy Cat has been replaced.
No.
Yeah, there's others
Long
in,
live
you know,
Grumpy
they
Cat.
tried to launch Grumpy Cat coffee. Who the hell wants to drink Grumpy Cat coffee? So I think they
That's
might have,
overexposure right there.
yeah. Remember when Grumpy Cat went to South by Southwest and people stood in line for hours to pose with Grumpy Cat and get, I don't know, his paw print or whatever? I mean, this, you know, people are crazy about animals.
Yeah. So from the dog agency to another form of dog, mechanical dogs. This is a story in Quartz by Mike Murphy about, of course, our favorite robot company, Boston Scientific, is in the news. Boston Dynamics, I apologize, is in the news again. Last month, they announced that they will begin selling their dog-shaped robot, Spot Mini, in 2019. So these robots have been in development for quite some time now, and now they're ready to unleash them on the market. So they're planning on building about 100 robots over the next year, and currently in the process of contracting manufacturers. The Spot Mini weighs about 66 pounds, has a battery life about 90 minutes. No information on how much Spot Minis are going to cost, but there is an accompanying video, of course, showing the Spot Mini navigating without aid of anyone the Boston Dynamics campus, and walking through halls and walking through doors and walking outside, and actually has a split screen showing you behind the dog as it's walking, along with the dog's vision of how it's recognizing barriers and avoiding them. So it's pretty cool that way. And then there was also an accompanying video that they released for Atlas, its humanoid robot Atlas, and it showed Atlas running through the woods and jumping over obstacles. You know, it's a long way from this kind of drunken stumbling that it did to now it's running, jumping, and actually doing backflips as well.
So, I can't wait to see the video.
The robot revolution starts next year, apparently.
Well, there was a cover story in New York Magazine about a sex robot. So robots are getting around. So I would love a dog robot for Benny. So this is, I have this in bad, but really from a PR point of view, it's getting a lot of earned media, but it's so silly. IHOP, the International House of Pancakes, announced the other day that they're changing their name to IHOB, IHOB, on June 11th, but nobody knows why they're going to call it IHOB any more than New Yorkers. You know, nobody's going to call it that. It's IHOP. And like they changed the name of the Triborough Bridge to the RFK Bridge. And if you ask somebody for directions, they say go over the Triborough Bridge. When you want to go to IHOP, you're not going to say go to IHOB. But anyway, it got them a bitchin' bunch of earned media. And annoyingly, they changed the letters to B in tweets. So when they tweeted to Patrick, they called him Batrick. But their tweet on June 4th, in which they announced that they were changing to iHob, as of today had nearly 6 million views, nearly 11,000 retweets, and 27,000 likes. So now the IHOP account is gone, and it's replaced by @iHob, which already has 328,000 followers. I was a little confused by that. So the story that this came from was an NPR story by Bill Chappell, and it was inside the headline said, IHOP says IHOB, and the internet says, what?
It's obvious. International House of Breakfast.
No, because they have burgers.
Well, you can have burgers for breakfast. They're not just for lunch and dinner
You
anymore.
have to wait till the 11th, Dave. They said it's not that. I mean, people have been guessing that. That's not obvious.
Mm.
I think that it should be
Blueberries?
breakfast.
International House of Blueberries?
No.
Hmm?
That's so that's why I have it in bad news, because it's kind of ridiculous. But look at all the earned media they got.
There you go. There you go. That's what it's
But
about.
yeah, I guess. And they have like a little animation where the P turns into a B and all of that. That's
Nicely done, iHob.
oh, that's really silly. So does that bring us to shiny objects?
It does. What do you
Okay.
got?
Well, one of them is it's kind of cool. It's 31 power tips for Chrome from Make Use Of, who always has great stuff. So I will post them. A lot of them are things I really actually didn't know. So a lot of them are in the studio, the experimental stuff, but there's some really useful ones and there's some really fun ones that are worth trying. So there'll be a link to that in the show notes at BeyondSocialMediaShow.com/231, because this is episode 231 of the Beyond Social Media Show podcast, which you can subscribe to on iTunes.
I got Shared Count. This is very simple. Shared Count is a website that you copy in, paste in URLs of pages that you want to count the social shares of. So you paste them in, and it returns the number of times that URL was shared on Facebook, was pinned to Pinterest, and stumbled upon, which obviously is going to be closing down on June 30. So that's kind of need to be updated, but it includes those numbers, and then includes a grand total. And it is useful if you're doing like want to get the shared counts for your earned media mentions. So easy to use, quick.
Is it free?
Yeah.
Oh, that's very cool. Stumble Upon is one of the more mismanaged great apps that ever were. There was a time when you could launch a website on there, when you could really do, because you could advertise on there, which nobody knew, and it was cheap as dirt, and it would show up in people's recommendations, and it just was very poorly managed and handled, and so it will die. The other thing that Google's doing a lot of changes to G Suite, which is where you pay for a company basically account, and they are adding App Maker into G Suite. So it's enabling you to build apps and accelerate your business workflows. And the good thing about it is, for people like me, it's a low-code development environment, and it's included in G Suite Business and Enterprise editions, as well as G Suite for Education. They'll be rolling out soon, and I think that's a really good addition to G Suite, which costs all of like $2 a month. It's not expensive.
Very cool. So let's wrap this up with some numbers. This is obstacles to augmented and virtual reality adoption according to AR and VR professionals. We love those two formats. We talk about them a lot. So I'm always paying attention to this. If I get to scroll at all. Come on. There we go. So the top one, not surprisingly, is user experience. That's cited by both AR and VR professionals. 39% says that's the biggest obstacle among AR developers, and 41% of VR developers cite that as well. Content offerings, not surprising either. For augmented reality, 25% say that is a big obstacle, but VR developers only 17% say. So I do think there is more VR content than there is AR content at this point. Cost is cited as an obstacle by 22% of VR professionals and 14% of AR professionals. That may be, that's VR is the cost of the machine with Oculus has always been an obstacle, so that's not surprising there. A consumer and business reluctance to embrace the platforms. 10% of AR developers cited that, and 9% of VR developers cited that. So hopefully we're gonna slowly progress on the AR VR front and gain adoption, but there are challenges.
Well, there are a lot of challenges, one of which is that a lot of the VR experiences make people nauseous and dizzy, and that, that's not pleasurable. But what I think is going to happen, according to Shell Israel and lots of other people who are really leading in this area in terms of explaining it to everybody and helping companies with it, is that we're going to have mixed reality, and it will bring in the best of all of those. But until there's a headset that doesn't take up half your face and that doesn't cost $700 or whatever they're down to now, it isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
But there are some definitely things advancing in that area, and Facebook has a headset that they've introduced. This, I think it's $200, right, Dave? So we'll get there.
There. It's not as it's not the Oculus hardware computer setup you needed before. Yeah.
But some of the things that are being done with it, like helping PTSD and things like that, are just too wonderful to not advance. So it will come. It's just really early. But people say, like, when's a good time to plant a tree? And the answer to that is 20 years ago. And when's a good time to get involved in this if you're a company? It's now. You need to plant your trees now. That's what's coming next. So that brings us to the end of Beyond Social Media Show, episode 231. And you will find it online with the video and the show notes at beyondsocialmediashow.com/231. David Erickson is on Twitter as @DErickson. He blogs at eStrategyBlog.com and CreativePR.com/blog, both of which should be on your subscription list. And he's on YouTube as eStrategy. I'm BL Ochman. I'm on Twitter as @What'sNext. I blog at What's Next Blog. I'm on YouTube as What's Next Blog. And my business site is blochman.com. And I have a startup called Fun Walkers, which are funny license plates for people who use walkers and rollators. Beyond Social Media Show is, as we've told you many times tonight, at BeyondSocialMediaShow.com. We're on YouTube as Beyond Social Media Show. We're on Twitter as BS Media Show. And we're on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and also Amazon Echo. And we will be back next week, same time, same station. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.